Hi class. Today we're going to draw this feather and I wanted to do a realistic drawing of a feather. It was requested from one of my high school students. So we're going to do this one, and this is a beautiful red tail feather I found outside in my yard here. And I love that it's all fuzzy at the bottom and it has all these kind of rips and patterns in it. So we're going to try and do this together. And notice how on the page here there's a lovely soft shadow, and if we put that into our drawing, then it's going to give it a lot of three-dimensional effects. So what do we start with our pencils, and I'm using a 4B in my mechanical pencil, and I have all of my pencils here, different variety of leads and blending tools. Definitely good for you to use if you want a realistic drawing. And I have my Strathmore sketchbook. So to start, we're going to put the center of the feather, and it's a little wider at the bottom, and it goes to a point at the top. So I'm just going to make a nice kind of curved shape, wider down here and to a very skinny point at the top. So I'm just going to come in and try and taper it all the way to a point. And when we put the shadows in, we can fix all these little bumps and things that. So I'm using a really dark lead on mine. At home, I want you to use your harder leads, your H's, so you don't get all this dark shadowing until you actually want to put in dark shadows. But for the sake of being able to view it on the video, I'm using a very, very dark lead here. And my quill is pretty white in the middle at the bottom here. And as it gets towards the top, it gets darker. I'm just going to add some lead to darken it a little bit, like that. Then I want to just draw the basic shape. So I'm going to just pencil in casually the shape of the outline of the feather. I'm not going to get too worried about all the little nuances in the feather, but just the basic shape for now. And I'm going to put all those beautiful slits and lines in it at some point. All right. So down here I have some little fuzzies coming out like this. I'll put in a few of those now, just to kind of show where they are. And it's very much like drawing hair when you draw a feather. Because if you notice the real feather, they starts at the bottom here towards this rib in the middle, and it splits out. So each little section is almost like a little clump of hair. So when we draw it, we want to make sure our pencils are going the same length from the start here and come out. So you always start your shading down here and pull out like this. But I'm just going to come in and put a few slits where the feathers come apart here, just to give it a very kind of realistic look. So just refining the shape of it. And I'm always looking at my reference material. I know some of you love to draw just from your imagination. As we're starting out as artists, though, it's very important to have reference material. You're looking at an actual object, or you're using a very nice photograph of something. If we try and think of what it looks like in our mind, it's oftentimes harder than to just see what there is in reality. So I'm just putting in a few of the basic lines. I want to keep the movement of the feather. And this little line goes all the way through. So I'm going to come in and darken that one side of the middle. And that'll just be in shadow. So this is the time where you want to start making things look three-dimensional. So you'll use your blending sticks to soften up that shadow on the edge there. So you know that this part of the feather is actually sitting up. You know, in real life, you can see there's this very hard round part and it's shiny. So we need to achieve that in our drawing. So we want it nice and smooth. And I'm going to just blend out and away this way, this line, to kind of pull out some of that light. And at the bottom here we have all these little fuzzies. You can use your blending tool to just kind of put those in a little bit. Give it that kind of whimsical and fuzzy look. Right. Alright, so let's start putting in some of this texturing. And now I'm going to switch to a bigger pencil. As much as I love my mechanical pencil, I want more lead so I can move a little faster. And I'm going to shade these little sections here. Now remember, pencil's always going the direction that things are in nature. And I'm not pushing hard. I'm using the wedge side, or creating a wedge on my pencil. So even though it's really pointy, I'm creating this kind of flat surface on one side. And I'm just going to come in and lightly give some pencil onto my feather. And always, always going the same direction as my feather in nature here. And this is something you can do fairly quickly if you have a nice edge on your pencil. So this side, remember, I'm going to go this way now. So I'm switching directions. And I just want to get a lot of shadow. My feather's not white, so I'm trying to get some color, some value in this. So I'm putting a very even tone of shadowing. So now you see I have all this beautiful shadow. I'm going to switch to my really big chunky one here, and I'm just going to blend it out. And again, I'm using the same direction as my feather is growing, or the flow of the line on the feather. And I'm going to do it fairly quickly, just so you can see the effect that blending does. Try not to make my camera too shaky here. And on the same thing on this side, we're just putting the base color, base shadow. Right, I'm not putting any details in right now. I'm just trying to get a nice, consistent, even tone. And just like anything that I draw, you come in, put the medium tone in. You're going to want to add darks and erase your highlights. So for now, I've left a few areas white where the feather is split. I'm just going to put some fuzzies here. With my, they're just kind of randomly coming out. All right, so now I'm going to go in with my dark pencil again, and I'm going to tidy up some things. So I'm going to come in here, and this is a very dark. This is a, what do I have, an 8B. This is my darkest pencil. So I don't recommend that you go really, really dark until you get a feel for how your pencils are. So definitely want to use a middle tone pencil. Maybe start with your 4B. And I'm going to put in some texture lines. So as you see, I start here and I'm pulling away from that middle. And this is just the same way as we kind of do hair. You want to add some texture lines. There's a nice split in the feather there. So I want to get some of the texture and the details of this feather. adding dimension. So I'm coming in and kind of randomly adding some darker lines. Keeping that middle nice and bright and white on the side. And if it's getting muddy, you can come in with your eraser and clean it up a little bit. Try and keep your art nice and tidy, and notice that I'm keeping my hand off to the side here. I'm not smudging through my art like a lot of you like to do. You know who you are. My Messy Hand Club. And then I'm going to come in and just really clean up my edges. Putting in more dark, and this is just to add some dimension. You know, on a drawing like this, you can spend as much or as little time as you want, depending on how realistic you want it. So if you want this thing super realistic, you're going to come in and do each little line. I probably will just do a quick little study on this feather. And anywhere you want a little wild, you can clean that up here. All right, get those eraser doohickeys off. And so I'm going to give a little bit of shadow on this edge because the feather is curving. All right, so let's put the pattern in. This is a red tail, so it has this dark stripe at the top. Goes across like this, both sides here. And I'm just pushing my pencil harder onto my paper to make it darker. And then as we go down, it has these little softer lines. I'm going to put them in here. Kind of a random look. So I'm putting in some of the texture and some of the patterns. I'll make it more realistic. And then here I notice there's a real nice shadow. This feather is curved under right there. And here too, some real darks. So I'm going to go ahead and just put some real darks in. And some textures here. Give it that line that the feather has. Long stroke lines here. Okay. And then I'm going to just erase a little bit of reflection all the way up here, just to give it a little brightness. Clean up those splits. And this is a super fast kind of drawing. I could spend more time on it, but it gives you the basic idea. You guys can slow down and do nice quality work. All right, so I like this. And then the other thing I wanted you to see is the shadowing of underneath. So I'm going to come in very, very lightly and just put a little graphite. And it gets narrower as it gets towards the top here. A little wider right here as it's sitting more off the paper. And then pretty dark underneath here and around these fuzzies. Towards the edge of my feather. And I'm going to use my blending tool and make a nice shadow. Now I'm not pushing very hard. This is very soft. And it's making a lot of noise, right? But I really am not pushing hard here. So I want to soften that shadow. And if you feel like your shadow is getting too dark, you can blend it out even more and use your kneaded eraser to pull out some of that darkness. So yeah, here's how that works. You can just touch it to pull up some of this graphite, right? Wherever it's feeling a little dark, and then just blend it back, soften it up more. And so I really want to use my dark pencil to come in here and really define that edge. This is kind of the part of the drawing where you want to clean up everything. I'm going to beef up the shadow right on the edge of this. So if you're using a really dark pencil, you can get a nice dark edge right here. And we're just going to soften that a little bit, blend it into our shadow. And then I'm going to just work on a little bit more texturing here. Now I'm going to use my my kneaded eraser just to pull out a little bit of this light. And the same on the other side here. Just take a little bit of that darkness out. And that is how you draw a feather fairly quickly.